The thunder cracked overhead as flames licked the night sky, casting an orange glow across the rain-soaked prairie. Nathan Walker spurred his horse toward the burning barn, ignoring the storm's fury and the shouts of men who deemed the structure beyond saving. Something pulled him forward, a cry perhaps, or an instinct honed from years on the frontier that told him someone remained inside. Wyoming Territory, 1876, was no place for the faint of heart. The land was as unforgiving as it was beautiful, and death visited frequently without invitation. Nathan had seen his share of it in his 30 years, first as a soldier, then as a drifter, and now as the foreman of the Double Creek Ranch. But nothing prepared him for what awaited in that inferno. His horse reared as they approached the crackling structure, the heat so intense it singed his eyebrows and burned his lungs. Nathan dismounted, pulling his bandana over his nose and mouth as he assessed the barn. The main entrance was engulfed, but a smaller side door remained partially accessible. "There's no one in there, Walker," shouted one of the ranch hands who had gathered at a safe distance. "The horses are out. Let it burn." Nathan ignored them, drawn by something he couldn't explain. Without hesitation, he plunged through the doorway into the blazing barn. Inside was hell itself. Smoke billowed in thick clouds, making it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. The heat was suffocating, the roar of flames deafening. Nathan dropped to his knees, crawling beneath the worst of the smoke. "Hello," he called out, his voice barely audible above the fiery cacophony. "Is anyone in here?" A faint sound answered him, not the crackle of burning wood or the collapse of beams, but something distinctly human. A cry. Nathan moved toward it, navigating around fallen debris and patches of fire. In the back corner of the barn, where the hay storage had been, he found her. A young woman, perhaps 22 or 23, clutched a bundle to her chest. Her dress was torn and smudged with soot, her face streaked with tears and ash. When she saw Nathan, her eyes widened with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. "Help us," she whispered, her voice hoarse from smoke. The bundle in her arms moved, and Nathan realized it was a baby, swaddled tightly and miraculously still alive in this hellish place. "I've got you," Nathan said, scooping the woman into his arms, baby and all. "Hold on tight." The barn groaned ominously above them as Nathan retraced his steps, struggling to remember the path through the smoke and flames. A beam crashed down just feet away, showering them with sparks. The woman buried her face against his chest, shielding the infant. By some miracle, Nathan found the door, bursting through it just as another section of the roof collapsed behind them. The cool rain hit his face like a blessing as he carried his precious cargo away from the doomed structure, not stopping until they were well clear of danger. The ranch hands rushed forward, expressions of disbelief on their soot-stained faces. "Who is she?" someone asked. "Get the doctor," Nathan ordered, gently laying the woman down on the wet grass. The baby began to wail, a healthy sound that made his heart leap with relief. The woman looked up at him through rain-drenched lashes. "Thank you," she breathed. Then her eyes rolled back and she went limp. Miss. Nathan patted her cheek gently, panic rising in his throat. She was alive, he could feel her pulse, but unconscious. The baby continued to cry, and Nathan awkwardly took the bundle from the woman's slack arms. It was a girl, no more than a few months old, with a tuft of dark hair and a pair of lungs that belied her tiny size. "Someone fetch Mrs. Peterson," he called, referring to the ranch cook who had raised 6 children of her own. "And find some dry blankets." As the ranch hands scrambled to follow his orders, Nathan looked down at the mysterious woman. She was a beauty, even covered in soot and soaked to the skin. Her hair was the color of honey, and her features delicate but strong. She wore no wedding ring, and her simple dress suggested modest means. Who was she? And what had she been doing in their barn during a thunderstorm? The answers would have to wait. For now, Nathan had 2 lives in his hands, and he wasn't about to let them slip away. 2 days later, Beatrice James opened her eyes to an unfamiliar ceiling. She blinked slowly, trying to piece together where she was and how she had gotten there. The room was small but comfortable, with simple furnishings and clean linens. Sunlight streamed through a window, indicating it was daytime. Then memory returned in a rush of terror: the barn, the fire, the desperate attempt to protect Emma. Emma. Beatrice sat up with a gasp, immediately regretting the sudden movement as pain shot through her chest. Her lungs felt raw, and her throat burned. "Easy there," came a deep voice from the corner of the room. She turned to see a man rising from a chair, tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes the color of a storm-tossed sea. His face was weathered by sun and wind, but handsome in a rugged way, with a strong jaw partially covered by a few days' growth of beard. He approached the bed cautiously, as if afraid she might bolt. "The baby," Beatrice croaked, her voice barely above a whisper. "My baby." "She's fine," the man assured her, his expression softening. "Mrs. Peterson has been caring for her. She's a healthy little thing, got quite a set of lungs on her." Relief washed over Beatrice, making her dizzy. She sank back against the pillows. "Thank God." The man poured water from a pitcher on the bedside table and offered it to her. Beatrice accepted gratefully, the cool liquid soothing her parched throat. "I'm Nathan Walker," he said as she drank. "Foreman of the Double Creek Ranch. You're at the main house now. Doc Simmons treated you for smoke inhalation but said you'd be all right with rest." Beatrice nodded, studying him more carefully. This was the man who had carried her from the fire, who had saved her life and Emma's. His hands were calloused, his forearms powerful beneath rolled-up shirt sleeves. But it was his eyes that held her attention, kind eyes that watched her with concern. "I'm Beatrice," she said after a moment. "Beatrice James, and the baby is Emma." She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "Thank you for saving us, Mr. Walker." "Nathan," he corrected gently. "And you're welcome, though I'd sure like to know what you were doing in our barn during a thunderstorm." Beatrice looked away, her hands fidgeting with the blanket. "I was trying to get out of the rain. I didn't mean to trespass." It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't entirely a lie either. Nathan seemed to sense her reluctance to elaborate. "Well, the important thing is you're both safe now. You can stay here until you're recovered." "I couldn't impose, it's not an imposition," he said firmly. "Besides, where would you go? The nearest town is 15 miles away." Beatrice had no answer for that. She had nowhere to go, not anymore. The weight of her situation pressed down on her, bringing unexpected tears to her eyes. Nathan shifted uncomfortably at the sight of her distress. "I'll fetch Mrs. Peterson. She'll bring your little one." He moved toward the door, then paused. "You're safe here, Miss James." "I give you my word on that." After he left, Beatrice let the tears flow freely. She had been running for so long, living in fear, that safety seemed like a foreign concept. How could she trust this man, this place? Yet what choice did she have? Minutes later, the door opened again, and a plump, motherly woman entered, cradling Emma. The baby was clean and wrapped in a fresh blanket, her cheeks pink and healthy. "Here's your little darling," the woman said cheerfully, placing Emma in Beatrice's eager arms. "She's been as good as gold, though she surely missed her mama." Beatrice hugged her daughter close, inhaling her sweet scent. "Thank you for caring for her, Mrs. Peterson." "Think nothing of it," the older woman replied, busying herself with straightening the room. "It's been years since I had a baby to fuss over. My youngest is 16 now." She paused, studying Beatrice with kind but shrewd eyes. Mr. Walker said you might be staying with us for a spell. Just until I'm well enough to travel, Beatrice said quickly. Mrs. Peterson nodded. No rush, dear. It's nice having another woman around. Nothing but men on this ranch, and they're a sorry lot when it comes to conversation, she chuckled. Now, I've made some chicken broth. You need to get your strength back. As the days passed, Beatrice regained her strength. Mrs. Peterson Martha. As she insisted Beatrice call her proved to be a godsend, helping with Emma and bringing Beatrice back to health with her hearty cooking and no-nonsense care. Nathan kept his distance, busy with ranch work, but he checked on her daily, his visits brief but considerate. Sometimes she would catch him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, curiosity, perhaps, or something deeper. One evening, a week after the fire, Beatrice ventured outside for the first time. The air was crisp and clean, the vast Wyoming sky ablaze with stars. She wrapped her shawl borrowed from Martha more tightly around her shoulders and made her way to the porch railing. "Beautiful night," came Nathan's voice from the shadows. Beatrice started, then relaxed as he stepped into view. "Yes, it is." He leaned against the railing beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "How are you feeling?" "Much better, thank you. Everyone has been so kind." "It's nothing," he said, waving away her gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." "Not anyone would have run into a burning building," she pointed out quietly. Nathan shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. A silence fell between them, not entirely uncomfortable. "Where's the little one tonight?" he asked eventually. "Sleeping." Martha offered to listen for her. Beatrice hesitated, then added, "You've never asked about her father." Nathan's expression remained neutral. "Figured it wasn't my business." "He's dead," Beatrice said flatly. "Killed in a mining accident before Emma was born." It was another lie, but one she had practiced often enough that it sounded convincing. The truth was far more dangerous. Nathan nodded solemnly. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." Beatrice turned her gaze back to the stars, fighting the guilt that always accompanied her deception. "I should probably go back in." "Wait," Nathan said, reaching into his pocket. "I found this in the barn after the fire. Is it yours?" He held out a small silver locket on a delicate chain. Beatrice's hand flew to her throat where the necklace had hung until the night of the fire. "Yes," she whispered, taking it from him. The metal was tarnished from the smoke but intact. "It was my mother's. Thought it might be important." "It is. Thank you for finding it." She clutched it tightly, fighting back tears. Nathan cleared his throat. "We're branding calves tomorrow. Not much excitement around here, but you and the baby are welcome to come watch if you're feeling up to it." The unexpected invitation surprised her. Yes, I think I'd like that." He nodded, seemingly pleased. "Good, Martha will show you where." He straightened, preparing to leave. "Get some rest, Miss James." "Beatrice," she corrected, echoing his own words from days before. "Please call me Beatrice." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Good night, Beatrice." As she watched him walk toward the bunkhouse, Beatrice felt something stir within her, something she had thought long dead. Hope, perhaps, or the dangerous beginnings of attachment. Either way, she knew she couldn't afford to let it grow. Her time at Double Creek Ranch was temporary. It had to be, for everyone's safety. The next day dawned clear and warm. Beatrice dressed in the clothes Martha had provided, a simple skirt and blouse that had belonged to her daughter before she married and moved east. They were a bit large but clean and serviceable. With Emma securely wrapped against her chest in a makeshift sling, Beatrice followed Martha to the corral where the branding was taking place. The air was filled with dust, the lowing of cattle, and the shouts of cowboys as they worked. "There's Nathan," Martha said, pointing to a figure on horseback. Beatrice watched as he expertly cut a calf from the herd, guiding it toward the branding fire with skill and patience. His movements were fluid, man and horse working as one. She had never seen anything like it. "He's good with the animals," Martha commented. "Best horseman in the territory, some say." "He seems very capable," Beatrice agreed, trying to sound neutral despite her admiration. Martha gave her a knowing look. "Been with Double Creek 5 years now. Owners hardly ever hear some Eastern businessman who bought the place as an investment. Nathan runs everything." Before Beatrice could respond, Nathan spotted them and rode over, tipping his hat. "Ladies," he greeted them, his eyes lingering on Beatrice. "Glad you could come." "It's fascinating to watch," Beatrice said honestly. "Ever seen a branding before?" She shook her head. "I grew up in Boston. We didn't have much occasion for it there." Nathan's eyebrows rose slightly. "Boston? That's a long way from Wyoming." "Yes," Beatrice agreed, offering no further explanation. If Nathan was disappointed by her reticence, he didn't show it. Instead, he dismounted and approached carefully, peering at Emma, who was awake and observing the proceedings with wide eyes. "She doesn't seem bothered by the noise," he remarked. "She's a brave girl," Beatrice said proudly. "Nothing much frightens her. Takes after her mother, I'd wager." There was something in his tone, admiration, perhaps, that made Beatrice's cheeks warm. "Nathan," called one of the cowboys. "Need you over here, duty calls," he said with a rueful smile. "Enjoy the show." He swung back into the saddle with effortless grace and rode back to the herd. Martha chuckled beside her. "That man hasn't given a woman a second glance in all the time I've known him. Yet here he is making excuses to come talk to you." "I'm sure you're mistaken," Beatrice protested, though her heart beat a little faster at the suggestion. "He's just being kind to someone in need." "Hum," Martha hummed skeptically. "If you say so, dear." They stayed for another hour, watching the cowboys work. Emma eventually fell asleep against Beatrice's chest, lulled by the warmth and the rhythmic movements of her mother's body. As they walked back to the house, Beatrice found herself thinking about Nathan more than she should. There was something about him, his quiet strength, his kindness, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, that drew her in despite her best intentions. But getting close to anyone was dangerous, especially now. She had secrets that could destroy not only her life but Emma's as well. And if those secrets caught up with her, anyone connected to her would be at risk too. No, she decided firmly. She would recover her strength, find a way to earn some money, and move on. It was the only sensible course of action. That evening, as Beatrice sat on the porch rocking Emma to sleep, Nathan joined her again. He had cleaned up after the day's work, his hair still damp from washing. "Successful day?" she asked. He nodded, settling into the chair beside hers. "Got through most of the herd. We'll finish tomorrow." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the creaking of the rocking chairs and Emma's occasional soft noises. "Your accent," Nathan said eventually. "It's different. Educated." Beatrice tensed slightly. "As I mentioned, I'm from Boston originally." How does a Boston lady end up alone in Wyoming Territory? It was the question she had been dreading, yet knew was inevitable. Beatrice chose her words carefully. "After my husband died, I had few options. A distant relative offered me a position as a companion in Cheyenne. It didn't work out." "And the barn?" Nathan pressed gently. "How did you come to be there during a storm?" Beatrice sighed. "The partial truth would have to do." "I was traveling by stagecoach to Fort Laramie, where I hoped to find work as a teacher. There was an incident, robbers. They took what little money I had. I've been walking, seeking shelter where I could find it." Nathan's expression darkened. "You were robbed. Did they hurt you?" "No," she assured him quickly. "They were. Surprisingly courteous for thieves, but I was left with nothing but what I carried, Emma, and a small bag of her things." It was a plausible story, one that explained her presence without revealing too much. Nathan seemed to accept it, his face softening with sympathy. "I'm sorry that happened to you," he said. "But maybe it was a blessing in disguise, if you hadn't sought shelter in our barn." He left the thought unfinished. Beatrice shivered, remembering the terror of that night. "How did the fire start?" "Lightning strike," Nathan explained. "Hit the roof. In dry conditions like we've had, it went up like tinder." He paused, studying her face in the fading light. "You know, we could use a teacher here." "Here, at the ranch," he nodded. "Several of the hands have families in the valley, maybe a dozen children altogether. Closest school is in town too far for daily travel. We've talked about hiring someone, setting up a schoolroom in the old bunkhouse." Beatrice's heart quickened at the possibility. Teaching was something she loved, something she was good at, and staying here where she had already found kindness and protection. No, she reminded herself firmly, staying in one place was too risky. "That's a generous offer," she said carefully. "But I couldn't accept charity." "It wouldn't be charity," Nathan insisted. "It would be a job, paid fairly with room and board for you and Emma included." The offer was tempting, so tempting that Beatrice found herself wavering. I need to think about it." "Of course," he agreed easily. "No rush to decide." Emma stirred in Beatrice's arms, making small fussing noises that signaled she was waking up hungry. Beatrice shifted her position, preparing to go inside. "I should feed her," she said, rising from the chair. Nathan stood as well, respecting her need for privacy. "Think about my offer," he said as she turned to go. "You'd be doing us a favor, really. These kids need education." Beatrice nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Inside, as she settled in the rocking chair to nurse Emma, she allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, what it would be like to stay. To have a home, a purpose. To see Nathan Walker every day. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. 2 weeks after the fire, Beatrice found herself in the old bunkhouse with Nathan, surveying what might become her classroom. The building was sound but dusty from disuse, with large windows that let in plenty of light. "It needs work," Nathan acknowledged, watching her reaction. "But it has potential." Beatrice nodded, already envisioning how she would arrange things. "The windows are excellent for reading light, and there's space for at least 15 students." "So you'll do it?" Nathan asked, hope evident in his voice. She had spent days weighing the decision, torn between caution and longing. In the end, the practical benefits had won out: a safe place for Emma, meaningful work for herself, and time to plan their future more carefully. "Yes," she said finally, "I'll do it. For the summer, at least. Then we can reassess." Nathan's face broke into a rare, full smile that transformed his features and made her heart skip a beat. "That's wonderful news. The children will be thrilled." "I'll need supplies," Beatrice said, trying to focus on practical matters. "Books, slates, chalk." "Make a list," Nathan replied. "I'm sending a wagon to town tomorrow. We'll get whatever you need." As they continued to discuss arrangements, Beatrice found herself relaxing, even becoming excited about the prospect of teaching again. Nathan was attentive to her suggestions, clearly valuing her expertise. "You've done this before," he observed. "Taught children, I mean." Beatrice nodded. "I was a teacher in Boston for 2 years before I married." It was one of the few truths she could share freely. "I loved it." "It shows," Nathan said softly. "Your eyes light up when you talk about it." Their gazes met and held for a long moment. Something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of growing feelings neither was ready to name. Beatrice looked away first, suddenly self-conscious. "I should check on Emma. Martha has been watching her, but I don't like to impose too much." "Of course," Nathan agreed, though she thought she detected a flicker of disappointment in his expression. "We can continue this tomorrow." As they walked back to the main house, Nathan cleared his throat. "There's a social in town this Saturday. Dance, potluck supper, that sort of thing. Thought it might be a good opportunity to introduce you to some of the families whose children you'll be teaching." Beatrice hesitated. A public gathering meant exposure, something she had been carefully avoiding. Yet establishing herself as the ranch's teacher would require meeting the community eventually. "That sounds sensible," she conceded, "though I have nothing suitable to wear to such an event." "Martha can help with that," Nathan assured her, "and it's nothing fancy, just neighbors getting together." His obvious desire for her to attend was touching. "Then yes, I'll go." His smile was worth the risk, she decided. Just this once. Saturday arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures, perfect weather for the social. Martha had indeed helped with clothing, altering one of her daughter's dresses for Beatrice. The pale blue cotton was simple but flattering, nipped in at the waist and falling in soft folds to her ankles. "You look lovely," Martha declared as she helped Beatrice pin up her hair. "That color brings out your eyes." Beatrice studied her reflection in the small mirror, hardly recognizing the woman who looked back at her. Weeks of good food and rest had restored her health, bringing color to her cheeks and fullness to her face. The constant fear that had been her companion for so long had receded somewhat, allowing her natural beauty to shine through. "Thank you, Martha, for everything." The older woman patted her shoulder affectionately. "You've brought life back to this place, you and that precious baby." "It's me who should be thanking you." Emma, freshly bathed and dressed in a clean gown Martha had sewn, gurgled happily from her makeshift cradle. At nearly 5 months old, she was becoming more interactive daily, responding to voices and faces with smiles and coos. "Are you sure you don't mind watching her tonight?" Beatrice asked for the 3rd time. Martha chuckled. "Child, nothing would please me more. Now go on, Nathan's been pacing the porch for 20 minutes waiting for you." Sure enough, Nathan was waiting, dressed in his best clothes, clean dark trousers, a white shirt, and a vest that emphasized his broad shoulders. He had shaved closely and his dark hair was neatly combed. When he saw Beatrice, he stood straighter, his eyes widening slightly. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Beatrice felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "Thank you. You're quite handsome yourself." The wagon ride to town was pleasant, the two of them sharing the seat while several of the ranch hands rode in the back. Nathan pointed out landmarks along the way, his arm occasionally brushing against hers as he gestured. Each touch, though innocent, sent a small thrill through Beatrice. The town of Silver Creek was small but growing, a main street lined with businesses, a church, and a schoolhouse that doubled as a meeting hall. The social was being held in a large cleared area behind the church, where tables had been set up for food and a platform constructed for the musicians. As they arrived, Beatrice felt a moment of panic. There were so many people, all strangers. What if someone recognized her? What if word got back to nervous? Nathan asked quietly, noticing her tension. "A little," she admitted. "I don't know anyone." "You know me," he said, offering his arm. "And you'll know plenty more before the night's over." His confidence steadied her, and Beatrice took a deep breath, placing her hand in the crook of his elbow. "Lead on, Mr. Walker." The next hours passed in a whirl of introductions. Nathan seemed to know everyone, and they all greeted him with genuine warmth and respect. He introduced Beatrice as Miss James, our new teacher, with unmistakable pride in his voice. The families with children were especially eager to meet her, asking about her background and teaching philosophy. Beatrice found herself relaxing as she discussed education, a subject she was passionate about and could speak on honestly. "My Billy can't sit still for more than 5 minutes," one mother confided. "Been a trial for every teacher he's had." Active children often learn best through doing rather than listening, Beatrice replied. I plan to incorporate plenty of hands on activities. The woman looked relieved. That's a refreshing approach. The last teacher just rapped knuckles when students fidgeted. By the time the dancing began, Beatrice had met most of her future students and their parents, all of whom seemed pleased with Nathan's choice of teacher. The acceptance felt good, better than she had expected. Care to dance? Nathan asked as the musicians struck up a lively tune. Beatrice hesitated. It's been a long time. It's just a simple reel, he encouraged. Nothing fancy. She allowed him to lead her to the dance floor where couples were already forming lines. The steps came back to her quickly, and soon she was laughing as they moved through the patterns, hands meeting and parting, bodies circling each other in the age-old rhythm of the dance. Nathan was surprisingly graceful for such a big man, and his smile as they danced made her heart flutter. For these few precious hours, Beatrice allowed herself to forget her troubles, to simply be a young woman enjoying the company of a handsome man. As the evening progressed, the music slowed. The musicians began a waltz, and couples moved closer together on the dance floor. One more. Nathan asked, holding out his hand. Beatrice knew she should decline. The waltz was intimate, requiring partners to hold each other close, but the magic of the evening had loosened her usual caution. Yes, she said, placing her hand in his. Nathan's arm circled her waist, his other hand clasping hers gently. Beatrice rested her free hand on his shoulder, acutely aware of his warmth and strength as he guided her in a smooth, graceful circle. "You're a fine dancer, Miss James," he murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "As are you, Mr. Walker. I wouldn't have expected it," he chuckled. "I contain multitudes. So it seems." She looked up at him, studying the strong lines of his face in the lantern light. "Thank you for bringing me tonight. I've enjoyed it more than I anticipated. I'm glad." His expression grew more serious. "It's good to see you smile. You didn't much when you first came here." "I didn't have much reason to," she admitted. His arm tightened slightly around her waist. And now, the question hung between them, laden with meaning. Beatrice knew she should step back, maintain distance, protect her heart and his. Instead, she found herself saying, "Now I do." Something changed in his eyes, a warmth, an intensity that made her breath catch. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, right there on the dance floor. Part of her hoped he would. The music ended, breaking the spell. Nathan released her reluctantly, though he kept hold of her hand. "It's getting late," he said softly. "Should we head back?" Beatrice nodded, suddenly aware of how tired she was. The excitement of the evening had sustained her, but now exhaustion was setting in. "Yes, I should check on Emma." They said their goodbyes and headed for the wagon. The ride back to the ranch was quieter than the journey in, but it was a comfortable silence, filled with unspoken thoughts and growing feelings. When they arrived, the house was dark except for a single lamp burning in the kitchen. Martha had left a note saying Emma had been fed and put to bed, and that she herself had retired to her room. "Would you like some coffee?" Beatrice offered, not quite ready for the evening to end. "I'd like that," Nathan replied. They moved quietly around the kitchen, careful not to wake the sleeping household. Beatrice put coffee on to boil while Nathan stoked the banked fire in the stove. "I've been meaning to ask," he said as they waited for the coffee to brew. "The locket I found, is there a picture inside?" Beatrice touched the silver oval that once again hung around her neck. "Yes, my parents." "May I see?" She hesitated, then unclasped the chain and handed it to him. Nathan opened it carefully, revealing the tiny portraits within a handsome man with kind eyes and a beautiful woman whose features echoed Beatrice's own. "You favor your mother," he observed, "so I've been told." Beatrice swallowed against a sudden lump in her throat. They died when I was 16. Influenza. This, at least, was no lie. The pain of that loss still felt fresh, even after all these years. Nathan closed the locket gently and returned it to her. I'm sorry. I lost my father young too. My mother raised me alone until I was 12, then she remarried. My stepfather and I didn't get along. I left home at 15. That must have been difficult, Beatrice said softly, touched by his willingness to share something personal. He shrugged. Made me who I am. Can't regret that. The coffee boiled and Beatrice poured 2 cups. They sat at the kitchen table, the single lamp casting a warm glow over their faces. The children start lessons Monday, she said, steering the conversation to safer ground. I've planned a simple assessment to determine their levels. They'll love you, Nathan said with certainty. You have a natural way with people. Beatrice laughed softly. That's kind of you to say, but I'm actually quite reserved by nature. Reserved, maybe, but genuine. People respond to that. He took a sip of his coffee, watching her over the rim of his cup. I certainly have. There it was again, that undercurrent of attraction, of connection that seemed to grow stronger each day. Beatrice knew she should discourage it, yet found herself powerless to do so. Nathan, she began, uncertain what she even wanted to say. He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. I know you have secrets, Beatrice. Everyone does. I'm not asking you to share them. Just know that whatever brought you here, whatever you're running from, it doesn't change how I see you. Tears pricked at her eyes. If only it were that simple. You can't know that. I know enough, he insisted gently. I know you're brave and smart and devoted to your daughter. I know you're kind and resilient. The rest, we can face together when you're ready. The tenderness in his voice undid her. A tear slipped down her cheek. I wish that were possible. Nathan's thumb brushed over her knuckles in a gentle caress. Anything's possible. I've seen enough of life to know that. Before she could respond, a soft cry came from the bedroom where Emma slept. Beatrice pulled her hand away, both relieved and disappointed by the interruption. I should go to her, she said, rising from the table. Nathan stood as well. Of course. Thank you for the coffee and the dance. At the door to her room, Beatrice paused and looked back at him. Good night, Nathan. Good night, Beatrice, he replied softly. Sweet dreams. As she tended to Emma in the quiet darkness, Beatrice wondered if she was making a terrible mistake. Every day that passed, every moment spent in Nathan's company, deepened her feelings for him. And his for her, if she was reading the signs correctly. But happiness built on secrets and lies was destined to crumble. Sooner or later, the past would catch up with her, and when it did, anyone close to her would be caught in the fallout, including Nathan. The school opened on Monday with 11 students ranging in age from 5 to 14. As Beatrice had predicted, the old bunkhouse made an excellent classroom, with its large windows and open space. Nathan had arranged for desks and benches to be built by the ranch carpenter, and the supplies she had requested had arrived from town. The children were a mix of personalities and abilities, but all seemed eager to learn. Billy Thompson, the active boy his mother had mentioned, proved to be bright and curious when given tasks that allowed him to move around. The older girls were helpful with the younger children, and even the sullen teenage boy in the back row showed interest when Beatrice discussed history. By Friday, Beatrice had established routines and assessed each child's educational needs. The work was exhausting but deeply satisfying, giving her a sense of purpose she had missed. Each evening, she would return to the main house to find Nathan waiting, eager to hear about her day. Sometimes they would sit on the porch after Emma was asleep, talking until the stars came out. Other times, they would walk around the ranch, Nathan pointing out improvements he planned to make. They never again discussed her secrets or his growing feelings, but both were present in every conversation, every shared glance, every casual touch that lingered a moment too long. June turned to July, bringing hot days and the occasional violent thunderstorm. The ranch bustled with activity as haying began, the men working from dawn to dusk to put up enough feed for the winter months. Beatrice continued teaching, adding outdoor lessons when the classroom became too stifling in the summer heat. She took the children on nature walks, teaching them to identify plants and animals, or had them practice arithmetic by calculating the dimensions of the corrals or the weight of hay bales. One particularly hot afternoon, she dismissed the students early and took Emma down to the creek that gave the ranch its name. The water was cool and clear, flowing over smooth stones in a series of small pools and rapids. Beatrice removed her shoes and stockings, lifting her skirts to wade in the shallows while Emma watched from a blanket spread on the grassy bank, surrounded by toys to keep her occupied. The cold water was heavenly against her heated skin, and Beatrice closed her eyes, enjoying the sensation. When she opened them again, Nathan was standing on the bank, watching her with an expression that made her pulse quicken. "Enjoying the creek?" he asked, his voice slightly rougher than usual. Beatrice nodded, suddenly self-conscious of her bare feet and ankles. "It's wonderfully cool." The classroom was like an oven today. Nathan removed his hat, running a hand through his hair. "Mind if I join you? Been working in the hay field all day." "Of course," she replied, trying to sound casual though her heart was racing. He removed his boots and socks, rolling up his trouser legs before stepping into the water. His relieved sigh as the cool water hit his skin made Beatrice smile. "Better?" she asked. "Much." He splashed water on his face and the back of his neck. "Thought I might melt today." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, letting the flowing water soothe their heated bodies. Emma babbled happily from her blanket, content with her toys and the attention of her two favorite people. "She's growing so fast," Nathan commented, looking at the baby with obvious affection. "Seems like she gets bigger every day." "She does," Beatrice agreed. "Soon she'll be crawling. I'll have to watch her every minute then." "We'll have to fence in part of the porch," Nathan said. "Give her a safe place to practice." The casual "we" didn't escape Beatrice's notice. Nor did the way it made her feel hopeful and frightened in equal measure. "Nathan," she began, knowing they needed to have a conversation they'd been avoiding. A splash of water hit her squarely in the face, cutting off her words. She gasped in shock, blinking water from her eyes to find Nathan grinning mischievously. "Did you just splash me?" she demanded, incredulous. "Might have," he admitted, eyes twinkling with suppressed laughter. Without thinking, Beatrice scooped up a handful of water and flung it at him, catching him right in the chest. His look of surprise was so comical that she burst out laughing. "Oh, you've done it now," he growled playfully, scooping up more water. What followed was a splashing battle that left them both soaked and breathless with laughter. Emma watched with wide eyes, occasionally squealing in delight at their antics. Finally, Beatrice held up her hands in surrender. "Enough, I concede defeat." Nathan's laughter faded as he took in her appearance, hair falling from its pins, dress clinging to her curves, cheeks flushed with exertion and happiness. His expression grew serious, intent. "Beatrice," he said softly, moving closer. She should step back, maintain distance, remember all the reasons why this was a bad idea. Instead, she remained still as he closed the gap between them, his hands coming to rest lightly on her waist. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, his face inches from hers. "I can't," she whispered truthfully. His lips met hers then, gentle at first, questioning. When she responded, sliding her hands up to his shoulders, the kiss deepened, becoming something hungry and needful that made her knees weak. Beatrice lost herself in the sensation, the warmth of his mouth, the strength of his arms as they wrapped around her, the solid reality of him after so many lonely months. For these few precious moments, there was no past, no future, only now. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Nathan rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if savoring the moment. "I've wanted to do that since the first time I saw you awake in that bed," he confessed. "I've wanted you to," she admitted, allowing herself this one honesty. A happy shriek from the bank reminded them they weren't alone. Emma had rolled onto her stomach and was attempting to pull herself forward, eager to join them in the water. Nathan laughed, reluctantly releasing Beatrice to wade to shore. "Look at you, little miss, trying to crawl already." He scooped Emma up, tickling her belly and making her giggle. The sight of this strong man being so gentle with her daughter made Beatrice's heart constrict with emotion. This is what she wanted, what she had never dared hope for after everything that had happened. A good man who cared for her and her child. A home. Safety. But was it real? Could it last? Or was she just setting them all up for heartbreak when her past inevitably caught up with her? As July turned to August, Beatrice found herself living in two realities. There was the bright, hopeful present teaching the children, watching Emma grow, and falling deeper in love with Nathan Walker with each passing day. Their kisses had become a precious ritual, stolen in moments of privacy behind the schoolhouse, in the shadow of the barn, on the porch after the household was asleep. Then, there was the dark undercurrent of fear that never quite left her, the vigilance that made her scan the faces of strangers in town, the nightmares that sometimes woke her gasping and trembling, the knowledge that she was building happiness on a foundation of sand. Nathan sensed her conflict, though he never pressed for explanations. Instead, he showed his commitment through actions, building a rocking horse for Emma, bringing books for Beatrice from his trips to town, making plans for improvements to the schoolhouse for the fall term. One evening in mid-August, as they sat on the porch watching a spectacular sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Nathan took her hand. "I've been thinking," he began, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. "Winter will be here before we know it. The schoolhouse will need a proper stove." "Yes," Beatrice agreed, wondering why he seemed nervous about such a practical matter. "The children can't learn if they're freezing. And your room here, it's fine for summer, but it gets cold at night come winter. Emma would be more comfortable somewhere warmer." Beatrice tilted her head, studying his face in the fading light. "What are you suggesting?" Nathan took a deep breath. "There's a small house about a quarter-mile from here. Built it a few years back, thinking the owner might want to stay there when he visited. He never has. It's been sitting empty." "Nathan, it has 2 bedrooms," he continued, speaking faster now. "A good stone fireplace, kitchen. It would be perfect for a family." Beatrice's heart began to race as she realized where this was leading. "A family." Nathan turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Marry me, Beatrice. Let me be a father to Emma. Let us be a family." Tears sprang to her eyes, tears of joy and sorrow mingled. "Oh, Nathan." "I know it hasn't been long," he said urgently, "but I love you. I think I've loved you since I carried you out of that burning barn, and I love that little girl like she was my own." "I love you too," Beatrice whispered, the admission both freeing and terrifying. "But there are things you don't know about me, about my past." "I don't care about the past," Nathan interrupted. "I care about now, about our future." He was so sincere, so certain. Beatrice wanted nothing more than to say yes, to embrace the life he was offering. But could she do it without telling him the truth? Could she bind him to her without warning him of the danger? Nathan. The sound of approaching hoofbeats cut her off. They both turned to see a rider coming hard up the road to the ranch house, his horse lathered with exertion. Nathan stood, instantly alert. "Stay here," he said, moving to the porch steps. The rider reined in sharply, dust billowing around him. "Walker," he called. "There's trouble in town. Group of men asking questions about a woman and baby, showing a photograph, offering reward money." Beatrice felt the blood drain from her face. This was what she had been dreading all along. They had found her. Nathan's expression remained neutral, though she saw his shoulders tense. What kind of questions? Wanted to know if anyone matching the description had passed through. Woman in her early 20s, blonde hair, green eyes. Baby girl, few months old. The rider glanced at Beatrice, then quickly away. "They're saying she kidnapped the child, that she's dangerous." A sound escaped Beatrice's throat, not quite a cry, more like the whimper of a wounded animal. Nathan turned to look at her, his face unreadable in the gathering darkness. "Thanks for the warning, Pete," he said evenly. "Any idea where these men are staying?" "Hotel in town, 4 of them, mean-looking bunch, armed." Nathan nodded. "Ride back, keep an eye on them. Let me know if they head this way." The rider touched his hat and wheeled his horse around, galloping back the way he had come. For a long moment after he left, neither Beatrice nor Nathan spoke. The only sound was the creaking of the porch swing, still moving from where they had sat. Finally, Nathan turned to her. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. "Did you kidnap Emma?" Beatrice rose on shaky legs. "No, she's my daughter. Mine." "Then why are men hunting you with a photograph and reward money?" His voice was controlled, but she could hear the hurt and confusion beneath the surface. "Because her father wants her." The truth, held back for so long, poured out in a rush. "Charles James, my husband. He's not dead. I lied about that. I ran from him because he's a monster, Nathan. A cruel, violent man who nearly killed me more than once." Nathan's expression shifted, anger giving way to concern. "He beat you." Beatrice nodded, wrapping her arms around herself as if suddenly cold despite the warm evening. "For 3 years. At first he was careful, bruises where they wouldn't show. Then he grew bolder. The last time he broke my arm and 2 ribs. I was 5 months pregnant with Emma." Nathan swore softly, his hands clenching into fists. "I knew then that I had to leave," Beatrice continued. "Not just for myself, but for my baby. I couldn't let her grow up with a father like that, so I planned carefully, saved what money I could, and when Emma was a month old, we disappeared." "But legally, he has rights to her," Nathan said, understanding dawning. "That's why you've been running. Why you're so afraid. He's a wealthy man from a powerful Boston family. The law would take his side, and if he found us." She shuddered. "He swore he would kill me if I ever tried to leave him. I believe he meant it." Nathan closed the distance between them in 2 strides, pulling her into his arms. "He won't touch you," he said fiercely. "Either of you, I swear it." Beatrice clung to him, trembling. "You don't know him, what he's capable of. These men he's sent there, not the first. He won't stop until he finds us. Then we'll make sure he doesn't." Nathan's voice was grim with determination. "We'll leave tonight, head west. I have friends in Montana who would help us." Hope flickered briefly in Beatrice's heart, then died. "No, I won't drag you into this. It's my fight, my problem." "It's our fight now," Nathan said firmly. "I meant what I said before. I love you, I want to marry you. That means your problems are my problems. Even if it means leaving everything you've built here. Your job, your home. None of that matters without you and Emma." He cupped her face in his hands. "Say you'll marry me, Beatrice. Let me protect you both." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Nathan kissed her then, a kiss that contained all the fear and hope and love that words couldn't express. When they broke apart, his expression was resolute. "Pack only what you need," he instructed. "I'll get horses ready and tell Martha what's happening. We'll leave within the hour." As Nathan strode toward the barn, purpose in every line of his body, Beatrice hurried inside to prepare. Emma was asleep in her cradle, unaware of the danger closing in around them. Beatrice packed quickly clothes for both of them, the few mementos she couldn't bear to leave behind, practical items for the journey ahead. Martha appeared in the doorway, her kind face creased with worry. "Nathan told me," she said quietly. "You poor child." "I'm sorry," Beatrice said, guilt washing over her, "for lying, for bringing this trouble to your door." Martha waved away her apologies. "You did what you had to do to protect your baby. No mother would fault you for that." She moved to help Beatrice pack. "Nathan's a good man. He'll keep you safe." "I know," Beatrice said softly. "I just pray I haven't doomed him by accepting his help." "That man was half alive before you came," Martha said firmly. "Now he has something to live for. Don't you take that from him by pushing him away." Before Beatrice could respond, Nathan appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "Pete's back. The men are heading this way. Someone in town must have talked." Beatrice's heart lurched with fear. "How much time do we have?" "Not enough to outrun them." Nathan's jaw was set in a determined line. "Change of plans. We're staying." "Nathan, no, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," he cut her off. "These men expect to find a frightened woman alone with her baby. Easy prey. Instead, they're going to find all of us." He glanced at Martha, who nodded firmly. "And we'll be ready for them." Beatrice shook her head, panic rising in her throat. "They're armed, dangerous. I won't have you risking your life, my choice." Nathan's voice softened. "Trust me, Beatrice, please." She looked into his eyes, steady, determined, unafraid, and felt her resolve waver. Could it be possible? Could they actually stand and fight rather than run? "What's your plan?" she asked finally. Relief flickered across Nathan's face. "First, we move Emma somewhere safe. Martha's room has a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards, big enough for her cradle." Martha was already moving, gathering Emma and her blankets. "I'll stay with her. No matter what happens, they won't find the baby." Nathan turned back to Beatrice. "You'll be in the parlor, visible through the window. They need to see you, think you're alone." "While you do what?" she asked, not liking where this was heading. "While I and several well-armed cowboys make it very clear that you're under our protection." His expression hardened. "These men are hired thugs. They're brave when facing a lone woman. Let's see how brave they are when the odds aren't in their favor." It was risky, Beatrice knew. But the alternative, running forever, always looking over her shoulder, suddenly seemed unbearable. Perhaps it was time to make a stand. "All right," she agreed, "but promise me one thing, anything. If this goes wrong, if something happens to you, promise you'll make sure Emma stays safe." Nathan took her hands in his. "Nothing's going to happen to me, but yes, I promise. Emma will always be protected no matter what." The next hour passed in a blur of tense preparation. Martha secreted Emma safely in the hidden compartment, surrounding the cradle with blankets to muffle any sounds the baby might make. Nathan gathered his most trusted men, positioning them strategically around the house and outbuildings. Rifles were checked and loaded, instructions given in low, serious voices. As darkness fell completely, Beatrice took her position in the parlor, a single lamp lit beside her. She held a book in her trembling hands, pretending to read while her heart hammered painfully in her chest. Through the window, she could see the yard, illuminated by the full moon that had risen above the mountains. Nothing moved except the occasional shift of branches in the light breeze. Then she heard the distant sound of approaching horses, moving at a walk rather than a gallop. They were trying to be stealthy to catch her unawares. Nathan appeared briefly in the doorway. "They're coming," he said quietly. "Remember, just act normal. I'll handle the rest." He disappeared again, leaving Beatrice alone with her fear and the book she couldn't focus on. Minutes stretched like hours as the sound of hoofbeats grew closer, then stopped altogether. They had dismounted, approaching on foot. A floorboard creaked on the porch. Beatrice forced herself to remain seated, though every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to protect her child. The knock, when it came, was surprisingly polite. 3 sharp raps on the front door. Beatrice rose, moving to the entryway on legs that felt like water. Through the curtained window beside the door, she could make out the silhouettes of men, 4 of them, just as Pete had said. Taking a deep breath, she called out, "Who is it?" "Madam," came a voice she didn't recognize. "Sorry to disturb you so late. We're looking for someone. Wonder if we might have a word." Beatrice glanced toward the shadows where she knew Nathan waited, receiving a barely perceptible nod. She opened the door a crack, keeping the chain in place. The man on the porch tipped his hat, a gesture of politeness that seemed at odds with the coldness in his eyes. He was tall and lean, with a scar running along his jawline. Behind him stood 3 more men, all wearing dust-covered trail clothes and grim expressions. "Good evening, madam," the scarred man said. "My name is Pike. My associates and I are looking for a young woman and her infant daughter." He reached into his coat and produced a photograph. "This woman. Her name is Beatrice James. She's wanted for kidnapping." Beatrice feigned surprise, studying the photograph of herself holding a newborn Emma. It had been taken the day they left Boston, when she still bore the fading bruises of Charles's last assault. "I haven't seen her," she lied, handing the photograph back. "Though I must say kidnapping seems a serious charge. Is there a reward?" Pike smiled thinly. $5,000, madam. Her husband is most anxious for their return." "That's a substantial sum," Beatrice remarked, trying to keep her voice steady. "She must be important to him." "Oh, she is," Pike agreed, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Very important indeed." He leaned closer to the door, his gaze suddenly more intent. "You know, madam, you bear a striking resemblance to the woman we're seeking." Beatrice's blood ran cold. "Do I? What a coincidence." "Yes, quite a coincidence." Pike's voice hardened. "I think perhaps you should invite us in so we can discuss this further." Before Beatrice could respond, the front door was yanked fully open, the chain snapping from its moorings. Pike stumbled backward in surprise as Nathan stepped into view, rifle leveled at the man's chest. "Evening, gentlemen," Nathan said conversationally. "I believe the lady told you she hasn't seen who you're looking for." Pike recovered quickly, his hand moving toward his gun. "This doesn't concern you, friend. Step aside." "That's where you're wrong," Nathan replied, his aim never wavering. "It very much concerns me. You see, Miss James here is under my protection, and I don't take kindly to men threatening what's mine." As if on cue, the shadows around the house came alive with movement. Cowboys emerged from hiding places, each armed and focused on the 4 intruders. They were outnumbered nearly 3 to 1. Pike's eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation. "You're making a mistake. The woman's a thief and a liar. That baby isn't hers to take." "That's not how she tells it," Nathan countered, "and I believe her over some hired gun." One of Pike's companions, a heavy-set man with a patchy beard, spat on the ground. "We ain't leaving without the woman and kid. Mr. James paid good money to get him back." "Then Mr. James has wasted his money," Nathan said coldly, "because the only way you're taking them is over my dead body." His expression hardened further. "And even then, you'd have to get through about a dozen more men who feel exactly the same way." The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife as both sides measured each other, calculating odds and outcomes. Beatrice held her breath, one hand pressed to her thundering heart. After what seemed an eternity, Pike slowly raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. "No need for bloodshed," he said smoothly. "Clearly there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," Nathan corrected. "Just a clear message. Beatrice and Emma stay here where they belong, and you take that message back to Charles James. Tell him if he sends anyone else after his wife and child, they won't be returning at all." Pike's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "We'll be on our way then." "One more thing," Nathan added as the men began to back toward their horses. "If I ever see any of you within 50 miles of this ranch again, I'll shoot you on sight. That's not a threat, it's a promise." The men mounted up, Pike casting one last venomous glance at Beatrice before spurring his horse around. They rode off at a gallop, dust rising in their wake. No one moved until the sound of hoofbeats had completely faded. Then Nathan lowered his rifle, turning to Beatrice with concern in his eyes. "Are you all right?" she nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Relief and disbelief warred within her. Could it really have been that simple? After months of running, of looking over her shoulder, of living in constant fear, Nathan gestured to his men. "Two of you follow them at a distance. Make sure they're really leaving. The rest of you keep watch through the night, just in case." As the cowboys dispersed to their assignments, Nathan gathered Beatrice into his arms. She went willingly, burying her face against his chest as the tears finally came, tears of relief, of gratitude, of hope reborn. "It's over," Nathan murmured into her hair. "You're safe now." Beatrice pulled back just enough to look up at him. "But what if they come back? What if Charles comes himself?" "Then we'll face him too," Nathan said simply. "Together, the way we'll face everything from now on." Martha appeared in the hallway, Emma awake and fussing in her arms. "Someone wants her mama," the older woman said with a smile. Beatrice took her daughter eagerly, pressing kisses to the baby's soft cheeks. "It's all right, my love," she whispered. "We're home now. Really home." Over Emma's head, her eyes met Nathan's strong, steady, Nathan, who had faced down danger without hesitation to protect them both, who loved them enough to risk everything. "About that proposal," she said softly, "is it still open?" His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Till my dying day. Then my answer is still yes." Beatrice moved into the circle of his arm, Emma between them. "Yes to marriage. Yes to family. Yes to everything." Nathan's kiss was gentle but filled with promise of a future, of safety, of love that would endure whatever challenges lay ahead. 2 months later, on a crisp October day with leaves turning gold and crimson on the surrounding hills, Beatrice James became Beatrice Walker in a simple ceremony at the Silver Creek Church. Emma, resplendent in a dress Martha had sewn, watched from the arms of her new grandmother as her mother and Nathan exchanged vows. The entire community turned out for the celebration, ranch hands, students and their families, townspeople who had come to know and respect the new school teacher and the ranch foreman. The couple's story had become something of a local legend, growing more romantic with each retelling. As Beatrice danced with her new husband at their wedding celebration, she marveled at how much had changed in such a short time. From terror and desperation in a burning barn to this moment of perfect happiness, it seemed almost unbelievable. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "That I'm the luckiest woman alive," she replied honestly. "That night in the barn I thought it was the end. Instead, it was just the beginning." Nathan pulled her closer, his eyes warm with love. "The beginning of everything," he agreed. There would be challenges ahead, Beatrice knew. Charles James was not a man who accepted defeat easily, but she was no longer alone, no longer running. She had Nathan, she had Emma, she had a community that had embraced them as their own, and that made all the difference. Epilogue: 5 years later, the sound of laughter drew Beatrice to the window of the small house she shared with Nathan. In the yard, her husband was teaching their son, 3-year-old William, to ride his first pony. Emma, now approaching 6, was already an accomplished rider, circling them on her own mount and offering advice in the authoritative tone she'd perfected. "Keep your heels down, Willie," she instructed her little brother, "and hold the reins like Papa showed you." Nathan caught Beatrice's eye through the window and grinned, his love for her as evident now as it had been on their wedding day. The years had been kind to them, all the ranch prospering under Nathan's management, the school growing to accommodate more children as the community expanded, their family flourishing in the peace they had fought so hard to secure. There had been one attempt by Charles to reclaim his wife and daughter. He had come himself, a year after Pike and his men had been sent away. But he had found not a frightened woman he could intimidate, but a united community standing firmly behind the Walkers. Faced with unwavering opposition and the threat of legal action for his documented abuse, Charles had finally admitted defeat. The legal divorce had been granted 6 months later, removing the last shadow from their lives. Beatrice rested a hand on her swelling belly, feeling the new life within her move. Their third child, due in the spring, another blessing she had never dared hope for in those dark days of her first marriage. "Mama, come see," Emma called, noticing her at the window. "Willie's riding all by himself." Beatrice smiled and headed for the door, stepping out into the golden afternoon light. This was her life now, not perfect, not without challenges, but filled with love and laughter and security. As she joined her family, Nathan dismounted to pull her into a tender embrace. "Happy?" he asked, though he knew the answer. "Completely," she replied, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. "More than I ever dreamed possible," and it was true. From the ashes of her past, from the flames of that burning barn, had risen a life of unexpected joy. A life built on truth, on trust, on love that had proven stronger than fear. A life worth fighting for. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, casting long shadows across the land they called home, Beatrice Walker looked at her family and knew with absolute certainty that whatever the future held, they would face it together. And that was all that mattered.